That's it really. We'll get rolling with this. You can see here this. Hopefully, you can see the second screen. That's the project. West.planetyouth.ie is the website. I won't dwell on that. And I'll stick this up in the chat in a minute. That's an email address, info@planetyouth.ie. So there's two ways to send in questions if you like. You will have seen this in the registration email. You can send me an email directly and I'll try and put it to the panel. If we haven't covered it extensively as we go along, I'll put it to the panel in the Q&A at the end. So by all means, send an email in on that address, or you can put it in the Q&A. There'll be a little kind of a chat Q&A feature in the webinar, which is confidential. So it'll only be me actually that'll be able to see that. So I can monitor that as well. So feel free to go either way. Put any question you might have into the Q&A, or you can send it by email to that, and it'll be covered confidentiality. There will be no names mentioned. Okay. So Planet Youth itself, it's a public health program. We operate here in Galway, Mayo Roscommon, and a couple other parts of the country now. It's based on the Icelandic prevention model, and it's an effort to improve long-term health outcomes for our young population, basically. Detailed surveys are done every 2 years here in the west of Ireland. We have 90 schools and centres in Galway, Mayo Roscommon, all participate and have in every survey since 2018. So a very detailed lifestyle survey is done. It asks our young people at post-junior cert, so they're 15 and 16. Any kids starting into secondary now this year very well may do this in 2029 or 2030, depending on what year they're in. But it's done every couple of years, and it gives a really, really insightful look into the lives of our teens, what's going well, what's going poorly, and where we could maybe look to make improvements. It's a big undertaking. The original surveys were done paper-based. They're kind of all done online now, but it's still a big undertaking. And this is sort of why we do it. This is a slide from Iceland which show this dramatic change in adolescent substance use rates, the problem they set out to address. But lots of other things improved and changed along the way. And there's similar charts for things like early school leaving and juvenile bullying and crime, and different things improved dramatically. And other things improved going up the other way, like physical activity and various other things. So it was a very successful way of working this prevention approach, if done at scale and done systemically. It's underwritten or backed by the big statutory organisations here in the west of Ireland, and we use their approach to address certainly some concerns around substance use, but there's a few other things which I'll show you very quickly. So these will be the 3 planned surveys currently planned to come. So we did one in 24. There's one this November in all the schools in the West, and there'll be another one in 2028 and 2030 and so on. Right. And this is really what we're trying to find out when we do the survey. So it's detailed, 45-minute survey. It asks the kids all about their life in school, their life at home, their life online, their friendships, their sports and hobbies. Substance use is asked about. No, don't forget, these are all 15 and 16 at this stage. So that sort of behavior is well underway with some of them. So it gives you a bit of an insight into other kind of parts of their lives as well. Mental health is asked about, sexual health is asked about, and on it goes, right? But it's the idea of it really, it's not so much about the kids that are sitting the survey, but rather about the children coming behind. So your children are going to be starting into secondary school after the summer. They'll be 12, 13. And we do a big part of the program for the incoming junior parents. We send out a lot of information here in the west of Ireland that first year incoming parents will get a lot of information in September. We do a lot of stuff for our junior infant parents, as I say, and then there's a preschool version as well. So around 6,500, 7,000 of these booklets go out every single year. It's a big undertaking. We usually get a lot of help from the schools with it. The kids in Coláiste Erie here in Athenry help with packing these booklets up for the incoming first year parents, and we do a big TY program with the girls in Salerno come and help with the junior infant booklet stuff. That'll be a project for them later on in the year. So it's a busy kind of undertaking, but it's important to get good information out to parents. Now, I won't dwell on this too much, but we do a lot of things here well in Ireland, parenting being one of them. And the people in Iceland took great care to sort of point out that they could see really in the data that we're very good for things like parental monitoring, parental supervision, caring and warmth at home. All the parenting metrics here in Ireland are good, and they've gone up, in fact, with each passing survey. We've been improving a little bit. So we're the best in the world, it seems, in this kind of space. So that's great. And it just talks about keeping communication strong and going in the, as the kids get older up through secondary school, they spend less time at home and more time out and about with their friends. And it might feel like we have less kind of influence, but it's still not the case at all. In fact, we're a very important influence in the lives of them. And it's just really talking about keeping good communication going, being able to spot if there's a problem, if there's family routines and rituals like meal times or things you like to do together, matches or whatever, just to keep all that going as they get a bit older. And the important thing is communication, really. But we're good there, right? It's a couple of things here around screens and bedtimes. I just want to touch on because these are kind of important. This is a bit of an issue in the survey over time. This is the same question asked the same way every 2 years about time on social media, and it's been going up. You get a steady march upwards with every 2 years. There's more and more time being put in on screens, which isn't good. The boys look a little bit better there than the girls, but their makeup, that kind of gap is made up with gaming. The boys do a lot of gaming, right? So everybody's spending a lot of time online, which isn't great, right? As it does impact things like physical health, actually, physical activity, less time to be out and about. It impacts homework as well. You can see the kids putting all this time in online are getting less time to do their homework and things like that. So just something to be mindful of and try and set some kind of limits on as they may be, it's a good time to do it. It's a good transition where you have the opportunity to maybe bring in some tighten up some rules around the screens. And the guys might talk a little bit more about that later around homework and things like that. No, this is our big preventable health problem. I always like to call it biggest preventable health issue we see in our young people is lack of sleep. Okay, so the kids are asked about sleep in the survey in some detail now, and only 4 to 5% of them are getting the right amount, which is 8 to 9 hours a night. 32% get 7 hours a night. They'll catch up. The 23% at the bottom there cannot catch up. Sleep deficit is a kind of physiological sort of thing, challenge that you can't really overcome. And we would all look like this as adults as well in terms of our sleep. Everybody's a bit sleep deprived, but as a young adolescent with a developing brain, they need their sleep a little bit more than adults. And it says here the importance of sleep. So this is a relationship between the amount of sleep you get and physical health, mental health, and what's called school engagement. And school engagement isn't academics per se, it's more around what I say call it readiness for school, enjoyment of school, getting on with your friends and teachers and being ready for the day, that kind of stuff. And like I say, if it was office engagement, if you ask 5,000 adults the same questions, we would look like that too, right? It's not a surprise, but it's very dramatic. And what I'd be saying is it's just something to try and help them with as the years go by is their sleep and sleep routine, sleep hygiene. This is one really that's important. Do you have a phone in your bedroom at night? 80% of young people say they do. These are 15 to 16-year-old kids now. So as a bunch of parents of sixth class kids, if they are just getting their phone or if they've recently got their phone or it's just something to really work on bringing in as a rule, is to charge the phone in the kitchen or the hall instead of in the bedroom. And the more people that can do that, the easier it is for all the parents around you, really. So the guidance really there will be 8 o'clock in first year, maybe 8:30. You can discuss it if it's in as a rule and a hard rule in the home. And if it's very unpalatable, it might be an idea to sort of have the agreement that everybody would do it. It's not just something that's forced upon a child that they'd have to charge their phone, they wouldn't have their phone in their room at night. If everybody did it, we'd probably all sleep a bit better. We know how addictive they are for scrolling and all the rest. And not much good happens on the phones after midnight, but there's 80% of them in bedrooms. So that's it. The apps are okay. The only thing I'll say about the apps is they're only really okay if they put the right birthday in when they're setting up the phone for the first time. A lot of them will try and put in, they're born in 2001 or whatever, so they can be 16 years old or 18 years old, and they'll get their Snapchat and their TikTok and those apps that are a little bit higher age profile. If they put in the wrong birth year, which a lot of them will try to do, these apps won't work terribly well or at all for that matter. Webwise is a very good website for information and all of that, really. So other than that, very nearly there, just to say, in your new schools, it's very good to be able to have other parents around you on side, or everybody will have, similar worries and concerns, particularly around outings and things like that. So just maybe getting to know other parents would be important and get to school events and things like that. So I won't dwell on that. One of the other things, just in terms of the data, is there is a kind of substance use component to the prevention side of it. In Ireland, you know. our main substance use problem, I suppose, really is alcohol, right? We see problems with vaping, of course, now. Some drug vaping, nicotine pouches, things like that are problematic. But alcohol tends to be quite the one, really. And certainly by the time they reach this age, right, a lot of them will be kind of trying to dabble with alcohol. A lot of them get drunk from a young age, particularly around junior cert results and kind of on up. It becomes it's not a great thing to have going on. We understand why it happens, but it's well understood now that the kids who start drinking young tend to be the ones that will have more problems down the line. So just to try and push on that, some of them will come asking as early as second year, believe it or not, for the can before the disco, which sounds horrific to you now, I expect, but it's just something that might happen. And the more parents that can push on it and try and force it on a year and make it 17 instead of 16 and 18 instead of 17, you'll do a huge amount for their health in the long term, but also then it's very helpful for parents around you as well, because the first parent that starts giving alcohol in the home puts everybody else under pressure around you because it's Mary can have a can of drink or Mary's allowed to drink, why can't I drink? Kind of that'll creep in. It's a bit like the phones maybe were in national school. So that's more or less it. Parental attitude there, you can see it really is important around alcohol. This is all the kids that went out getting drunk in the last month. At the time of the last service, we were drunk in the last month, there was, right? This is them correlated against sort of parental attitude. If your parents are totally against you drinking, you're far less likely to be out drinking and so on. So it stands to reason, but it's very clear there in the data. So try and defer on the alcohol, help them with their sleep, work together. And a couple of other things to touch on for me really would be there's great supports out there. Avail of them, if you can, and avail of them early. Don't like struggle on. If you think there's a problem, try and get a bit of help. There's some good places to start there. The schools have fantastic pastoral care systems now, which Niamh will talk a bit about in a minute. Family resource centres are great if you have one near you. There's loads going on, and there's lots of good kind of website and online information. And just in terms of school avoidance, I'll touch on that quickly to say it's something to watch out for. There's some very good information out recently. The ESRI stuff showing the impact of missing school. Even just a day, once in a while, it adds up very quickly. And if missing school kind of starts, it's very easy. Once you start, it's very easy to stay missing school. And it's a very, very bad habit to try and, to get into. So just be watchful of that. Now, most schools are kind of on the ball with that sort of thing, but and will help, but just try to not get into that rabbit hole, if you like, of missing school can be a big problem after a while. Okay. So that's it. I'm just going to touch on the website very quickly, right? And we might have a brief look at it at the end, perhaps, right? But this is a website that was developed as part of the overall project, and Helen was very helpful at the time when we set this up back 2020. Helen, this was a COVID piece of work because back in COVID, all the schools finished March 17th, if you recall, and everybody then nobody knew when or if they were going back to school, what that was going to look like, but they ended up going back to school in September of 2020 with no school transition work. It was quite tough because they were going into schools, masks on, all of that. And so that was really why the website was developed, because there was very little school transition done that year at all. So it was really tough on them. But it's a good website. We've done this project and we've kind of tweaked and improved the website over time. You can see here some of the topics on it, like how school works, skills for school, tips from older students, and so on. I'll show you this very quickly now in a second, right? And this is the site traffic through the summer, right? You can see there's a massive kind of push on it towards, the end of the school year, and it kind of just keeps on going through the summer and then up again a little bit before the return to school. But it's a nice kind of a site. These are the main kind of things the kids like to look at. So how school works, timetable, skills for school, tips from older students. Those would be the kind of big ones they're in looking at, and lockers, and you can see stuff like that there. Okay, that's more or less it. There's loads of information on the website, which I'll show you in a second, and that's the email address again. And just finally, before we move on to the questions, just a couple of quick ones. This is the Planet Youth website here. You see it in the address bar here at the top, west.planetyouth.ie. There's lots of those are some of the reports I was just showing you. loads of resources on here, parenting information. This video, the recording of this will go up here under the resources videos section on here, probably on Wednesday, maybe tomorrow, right? But you'll get an email about it, as I say, and you'll see on here there's a few other bits and pieces like there's a teaching website. The Step Up link is here actually, and you'll see actually need to have a quick look at that, right? But if you click into this, how school works, you'll see things like school routine, timetable, lockers, school bags, and so on. The timetable is in here. Some of these have a bit more information. You can see here what a typical timetable looks like. It looks very confusing, of course, but it shows them, maybe a little bit about how to color code it and what that looks like. And there's some links to YouTube and things like that. So it's popular. It's a useful little website. And Gina, we touch on this at the end. This is your website here, but we'll come back to that, I think. So I'm going to shut up now, stop sharing, and what we do is we'll jump into the questions. I think I have them open here. A second. Okay, so like I say, feel free to put questions in to the chat, right? Or send me an email and I'll be monitoring that as we go. If we jump in here, there's about 25 of them here in total, and we cover a lot of ground. We're doing well to get through them. The plan is to finish up here around half past, maybe 8:35, I think would be our kind of our deadline time, right? So here's one for you, Niamh, if that's okay. Is there an entrance exam to grade students going to school? If so, are classes graded with one A being the highest, etc.? That's something you come across.
So hi everybody, how are you all? I can certainly only speak for my school, but I'm imagining that most schools will be like mine. No, they're not streamed. The classes aren't streamed, particularly in first year. What you might find is that your child will be asked to do a CATS test. So that's a cognitive ability test. And what it does is it evaluates a student's academic potential rather than their learned knowledge. So you have kind of four strands to that. You have the verbal, the quantitative, the non-verbal, and the spatial awareness. So it's all about kind of reasoning and all of that sort of thing. So it just basically gives the school an idea of the potential of the student. So again, it's nothing to be worried about or anything like that. But that's normally the sort of testing that's done widely in Ireland and in the UK. So everyone is in on a clean sheet in first year, getting the same opportunity. So it doesn't really matter kind of where they're at in sixth class. So it's all about a fresh start and going forward.
And the cat stuff, a lot of schools might do that and they share the results then with the parents. So it might be, before the summer or in the start of the next year or what have you. And they look kind of very confusing, but are they really about trying to show a child's, how they might learn? Do you know, are they a
Yes.
visual learner? They like to,
Yeah.
there's these different ways that they can study and learn. And they're great for parents that way to say,
Yes.
well, how do we need to set things up for them for success?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So like, I mean, you might have the auditory learner, the visual learner, the kinesthetic learner. So everyone will have sort of a certain amount of all three various ways of learning. But if you know your child and you know kind of where their strengths are, then you can feed into that a little bit better. Like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's I think the common one is that parents see the CAT exam and they think that that's for stream and the kids and all the ones who
no,
do
it's
best go
definitely
into this
not.
class, and that's not the case at
Yeah,
all.
no, no.
No, so yeah, I've never heard of schools these days that have that kind of a setup where there's
Yeah,
somehow put all these kids over in this class. It doesn't really work like that. Sort of out
no,
of a hat, nearly.
it's all about differentiated teaching now and trying to have everyone, have mixed ability classes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. One for you, Helen. My child is worrying. Okay, it's a common one. My child is worrying about how he's going to do such a long day at school, then come home and do more homework, and then fit in sports in the evening. So it's a busy day now, more homework, etc., etc.
It's
There's a
a
lot to unpack in that one. But what do you
there
think?
is it is a very busy day. It is a longer day. I mean, just practically speaking, children are getting up earlier, they're going to school earlier. the day is longer and they're coming home later, and then they have their extracurricular things like sport and music and things like that. So it is a longer day, and there is an adjustment period. And before I talk about the lead up to school, I mean, from September to about midterm, they're going to be really, really tired. So even being aware of that and knowing that when they come home from school, they'll be overwhelmed a little bit, and they just need a bit of a break. In the same way that, I don't know if you do this, but in the past I would have sat in the car outside the house for 10 minutes before I went in, just to gather myself. So they might need that 10, 15 minutes once they get home from school, just to gather themselves a little bit. But really, what to do now, you have the summer, which is fantastic, I think. You've got the summer to plan and prepare, and it'll come down to planning and preparation in terms of getting organized, using the summertime, using the activities that they have in the summer. Instead of you remembering everything, instead of you planning everything, instead of you organizing everything, pushing little bits of responsibility over, sit down with the calendar and say, well, what's coming up over the summer, the couple of months that you've off, or the 3 months that you've off? What have you got? Popping those into, creating even a common calendar so that you can all keep an eye on things. Reminding your child that they have something coming up so that they can prepare what you need to bring for this, and helping them to pack for it. If the summer holidays, making a list, things like that, just so that they get out of the children's mode of it being done for them and into the young person's mode of doing it for themselves. And this is not just about school, because this is about life. These are life skills. You're not always going to be there to do these things. I think as well, it's important to talk it up when you're talking to them about it. This is something that maybe they haven't done it already, but they're going to be well able to do it. And believing in them like that is really important. Having helping them to build their confidence. So again, sitting down and having a look at a school timetable. There's an example of one there on the stepup.ie website. Have a look at a timetable, and learning how to color code a timetable so that you know the days of the week that you have to bring something extra into school, like woodwork or home economics. And anyone that has children in secondary school will know the rush in the morning to be told you have to go to SuperValu to buy something for cooking class that they forgot to get. So helping them to plan this, not you doing it. I think that's the biggest part of it. And using the summertime to prepare all this is hugely important. They'd be the key things. Sleep then would be the other part of it. And trying to get them, particularly as you get closer to school time, trying to get them into the habit of going to bed earlier. Make it less about keeping the rules around bedtime, and more about understanding the importance of sleep and what happens while your body is asleep. Uh, Apart from just generally resting, things like muscle injuries or, a belt of a hurl, all that kind of stuff, that repairs when you're in a deep sleep. Information you learned during the day, whether it's conversations or academic or whatever, sits in basically the front of your head, and it becomes assimilated into your memory overnight. That those are important things for them to understand. Your body grows at night in sleep. So when you come at it from that side, there's more of an understanding of why sleep is important, rather than, trying to police a bedtime all of the time. So encouraging them along those ways to get good night's sleep. They're starting the day in good form. They will have a lot to do. There's a lot of moving and carrying and whatnot in the day, but they're in better shape starting out as well. I think that's an important part of it.
Okay, there's a couple here. Well, one question. I'm going to put it back to you, Helen, but also maybe Niamh, you could jump in on it as well. We've touched on it quite a bit there, but it's sort of a follow-up-y one. It's around organization. So is there anything I can do to help my child be more organized for school? He's not great when it comes to organization, homework, etc. So it's busier time, right? No question. More subjects, more homework, more this, more that, more everything, really. It just starts to get a bit busier. So I'm obviously thinking of time management and things like that, but they're not natural skills. You have to somehow, support them with it and help them with it. And I know on my own, the school will sometimes put on a little bit around study skills and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily come in first year. It come a bit later, when they get in towards the exams and things like that. So have you any thoughts about that, guys, about, how to get kids more organized? Is that something you've come across?
Yeah, I think definitely to, watch the timetable, and particularly with homework, to see, well, okay, for example, I've history on a Tuesday and I've history on a Thursday. So if I get homework, say, in history on a Tuesday, but I'm kind of subject heavy that day, I could leave that homework until Wednesday evening. before Thursday, or if I'm homework light, I can get it done that day. So it's to kind of really look and see put a strategy in place and kind of get used to having the idea that, well, I know that my child had history today now, and most likely will have a lot of homework in that one, or whatever the subject is, because some subjects won't have a lot of homework and some will. So it's all about trying to organize that and not to spend too much time on homework. Once one subject, I think, and this comes up quite a bit, where a student is struggling maybe in a particular subject or whatever, or across the board. Homework can be torture. It can be torture for parents and for students. What I'd be saying is make a good stab at everything, but don't be afraid to send the note in saying, look, couldn't understand it, rather than saying, well, we better get this done, just to be as honest and transparent as possible. Because if at home you're doing the homework for the child, the teacher is never going to know that they're struggling. So just being as honest as possible. But organisation definitely, and I know Helen talks about this and I talk about this all the time, get the stuff ready the night before. Have it left in the hall where you're going to actually trip over it the night before. If you've got something like PE or whatever it is and you need the gear bag. If you need to have, we talk about this all the time as well, these kind of envelopes with the zips on them, these big kind of envelopes, and to put all of the stuff in that belongs to a particular subject, because you've subjects that have loads of elements to them, like art or music or TG or any of those sorts of subjects. So it's easier to just grab the whole envelope rather than, oh, what do I need now? And the panic and everything can set in. So I'm sure Helen has loads of other tips for you there.
Well, I think that the getting the bag ready the night before. I mean, once they finish their homework, packing the bag for the morning and leaving it ready out in the hall, someplace where they'll see it, jacket thrown over it. The only thing to go in maybe in the morning is the lunch. Making sure they have their locker keys. And if you think about it practically, they wake up in the morning and there's already a little bit of, I won't call it anxiety, but certainly, they're conscious about the day. Will I know my way around? Will I all these questions they have? So they don't need the extra load of where's my this and where's my that. Everything's ready to go. That I think is a really important thing. Other tips that I've heard, even from other students, would be things like start the homework of the subject you like the least, because even though you don't like it, you are better able to do things earlier in the evening. So that by the time you get to later, the last few subjects, if it's something you love, you're going to find the energy to do that homework. Whereas if it's something you hate, you're going to really struggle with it. So, I think in the world of kind of work psychology, it was called kiss the frog. Do the one that you like the least first and work your way then to the one you like the most at the end. And even simple things like that can be really important. Checking the timetable. Highlight the timetable, like I said earlier, about any of the days you have to bring in something extra, like PE gear, the tin whistle, anything for art, home economics ingredients. And then as a parent, just remind your child, oh, you have PE tomorrow, don't you? And they go, yeah. And you go, well, how about you get your stuff ready now? And I mean, straight away, you're going to get, I'll do it in a bit. And you go, no, I think do it now. I know I'll do it. No, do it now. And just see it through. And when they have it done, it's left beside the bag. And there's no racing around in the morning, bringing anxiety levels up before the day ever starts. And I can't overemphasize those. I could keep you here for a week talking about just that.
And I would
Well, we
add
might.
that prepare yourself as the parent. Get your bag ready the night before. Manage your expectations, because we all know mornings can get very busy. But if you're not prepped, and then, one of your children, your adolescents, is maybe a slow burner in the morning, you have your cup of tea or whatever you need to do in the morning, you're prepped and ready. And it avoids a lot of meltdowns.
That's a very good point, Gina. The fact that children are different. You might already have an older child who's a particular way of working, but you can have the one. I have one that had to be brought very gently into the world in the morning. And if you pounced and said, get up, get up, get up, you were paying for the next 45 minutes, and everything was going to be a struggle. So knowing how your child needs to be managed, the same way you did when they were little. I mean, if you wanted your 2 or 3 or 4 children to be in the car at a certain time to go somewhere, you used a different strategy on each one. You may well have to use a different strategy on each teenager as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a couple of simple ones there. Might be helpful is, the color coding of the timetable, and your yellows and your blues and your red as maths is the envelopes that Niamh's talking about. Those are the big plastic ones that you can put in the workbook and the,
Yeah.
the the journal, everything associated with subject. But you have red color that red, and it's a nice little project late in the summer. You might, when they go to Mr. Price and get all their bits, is color code the timetable and have the
Yeah.
zipper the same for that subject, the same color. And the other one maybe would be just getting that when they get their timetable, get it photocopied and stick it up on the back of the front door and on the fridge and in the bedroom, and just get a few copies around. And I remember Helen, you saying one time, whatever about having that it's home ec tomorrow and getting those ingredients ready and asking, but just it's good to know the routine of the week. And sometimes there's 2 week timetables and different things, but just the ebb and flow a little bit, their hard day and their easier day. And maybe I said try and,
Yeah.
it could be nice to them after the hard day when they come in
Yeah,
from
and
the
it's not about spoiling. And I know some people might think, well, you're really spoiling them. But I mean, if there is a day of the week that's a bit tougher, there's nothing wrong with having their favorite dinner that evening. And it's not really about the fact that you're giving them their favorite dinner. It's the fact that you thought about it, that you noticed that this is a tougher day and I'm doing something nice for you. And it's when teenagers see their parents looking after them like that, I think those are the really important things.
Okay, now there's one here for you, Gina. This comes up most years, all right. My child is very anxious. I'm worried about it going to a secondary school. So it's a big transition. It's a big time in a young person's life as a move to big school. Carries a lot of concern for a lot of young people. Is there anything you'd have any thoughts about that or ways to prepare?
Well, I suppose, let's put down the term anxiety because we hear it quite a lot. So let's think of it, your child, maybe you have certain fears about secondary school. And when we're exploring fears, we're also exploring what are we looking forward to. So we need to really bring balance. And often for adolescents, we have to talk up something, and it's not avoiding the fears, but it's going, well, what are you most looking forward to? So I always start when I'm working with adolescents on resourcing. What do you do well? What's, interesting about the subjects, the sports, your friends? And then they're much better able to say, well, I'm worried about. So I would look for, the three things you're really looking forward to. And I would have these conversations during the day, on a Saturday, because what you find when they go to secondary school, a lot of the worries start to come out at night. And you may already have a particularly sensitive, gorgeous adolescent child, and you know that they talk about things at night when you're tired, when Emmet has spoken about, the importance of beauty sleep. So get those conversations out early. Some parents say to me, that car time is the best. But what went really well today? Let's hold that one thing, because you want them to go back to secondary school. And we have all these terms like school avoidance and panic and stress and all that. And often we have to face our problems, and we have to challenge our problems, and we have to comfort our problems. So I would bring in that, okay, what can we do there? What can we look at? And all the time you're trying to help them regulate, and you regulate. Are you predicting a worry here? Are you inventing it? Or are you willing to see how they get on and resource them with it? So a lot of it is exploration. A lot of it is understanding what your child is like already. And so you already know how to support them. And this is new. And we deal with new. We deal with new every single day. And we deal with challenge every day. So everything's possible. And then you're going back to the school. If you need to speak to a teacher, to a principal, to the year head, as Niamh will tell you, everybody's on hand to have a confidential conversation with you and to alleviate maybe they're your worries and stresses. Maybe you're triggered about your experience in secondary school. And we, as parents, we tend to project onto our teenagers. But there's always somebody to have a conversation with. If you need the support as a parent, please liaise back with the school. Please liaise with another parent. There's always somebody that says, gosh, I know what you mean, or let's look at this possibility. So share the load is what I'm encouraging.
Thanks, Gina. Okay, there's one here. I'm going to call it like maybe a pastoral care thing, but there's a few different ways you could look at it. So I'm just going to read it out, and maybe Niamh, you could jump in on it, and we'll see. Who will my child talk to if a problem arises? Right now, they're saying this is more like a sensitive child being to therapy, but I'm just thinking in a more general way. Okay, that's one, but a lot of schools have a very well-defined pastoral care kind of setup, or even like mentoring programs in-house where they might get a TY or a fifth or sixth year child to, that'll be your buddy for the term, and they kind of show them the ropes. Is there anything you could kind of elaborate there in terms of pastoral care for young people coming in?
Yeah, well, I think in today's climate, particularly, and this whole notion of well-being and everything, there has been a bit of an overhaul on well-being in secondary schools, which is fantastic. And pastoral care is super altogether, in my experience anyway. There's a whole kind of beacon alta policies have been developed throughout the schools. So you have a beacon alta, which means be kind. And you have now, they realize the importance of, rather than just having policies in black and white, there are student friendly versions. So for example, we have this poster, and it's there for people to see, like a roadmap on how to navigate nicely through school. So then going alongside that, then we have our mentoring programs. So our senior students will be linked in with a few first years, and they'll be there for them to talk to. There'll be referral systems within the school, a student support team. So that'll be often the principal, the chaplain, the guidance counsellor, the year head, and maybe someone from the SEN, Special Educational Needs Department. So all of these people work together. We have pastoral care meetings, and we make sure that that there are lots of different avenues and ways for people to look for help and guidance. And it's about kind of constantly, we're looking all the time to make sure everyone is getting on okay. And it could be anybody could say to you, look at I'm kind of wondering, such a one has gone a bit quiet in class or whatever, and it'll be a bit of an opener then to talk to that person and see how they're settling in or how they are. And but yeah, there's loads and loads of people that as students can talk to. We're all here. We're in loco parentis. We're here to help, really. That's kind of the big bottom line. And even though school is a daunting big place and all the rest of it, and you're going from maybe a small primary school into a big secondary school, where we do have supports in place.
Yeah,
Hope
I
that's
imagine a lot of parents might have been communicated a little bit about this already, but not every school does this in the same way. But an awful lot of schools would have like a day, like maybe the first day back will be designated for the first years only, and they come
yes.
come in and see the lie of the land before it gets too busy, or they might have had a trip in or two before the summer in some schools, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it would be uncommon now for a bunch of kids in first year to come in and just be into the helter skelter straight away. It's usually a fairly gentle
Yes.
introduction into school life for the first little while, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already had our incoming first years in for a day there at the end of the term, and they will be in for a day before everyone starts back. So like they do have time to kind of just find their feet. And also there's things like people have worries about, say, how are they going to navigate a big school building? The diary, the school journal, I'm always going on about this. It's a really, really useful tool. So you open your school diary and there's a map of the school in it. So where the classrooms are and all the rest of it, and how to get around. And there's lots and lots of really, really good, useful stuff in the diary. So don't be afraid to have a look at that as well, and check in with it and see the different policies and the code of good behaviour and that beacon all the policy which I'm telling you about now. Make sure you have a look at it, and if it's a thing like that, you feel like you need a little opener, a discussion opener with your child, that can always be a useful way of starting a conversation.
Yeah, that's a newish standardization of kind of anti-bullying
Yeah.
procedures and guidelines across the country in national
Yes.
schools and in secondary schools. Brought in
Mhm.
last year, was it? Started
Brought
last
in,
year?
yeah, brought in last year. So we all had to work on one policy, and so it's just basically so it's more consistent throughout the country. But I think for me, I would have worked on that very closely in my school. And what I found the most useful part of it was creating this beautiful, colourful poster for kids to look at, and they're all over the school. And so there's that reminder to be kind, that reminder to say if there's something a bit off, you're telling school, we go tell, we say, look, I'm not happy with the way such one has been treated. I don't like what I'm seeing. So we encourage that open conversation.
Okay. One for you, Helen, about homework, if that's okay. We've seen this kind of come up before, but should a desk in my child's bedroom be set up for homework instead of at the kitchen table, concerned he'll be dossing up there without supervision?
Well, I think it's a balance between the having them up there and the notion that they might be dossing. I don't think it's possible to do secondary school homework in the kitchen like it was to do primary school homework. For starters, there's just too much stuff. And secondly, there are too many distractions, and it is easy to distract them. So maybe over the summer, looking at their bedroom and maybe a little bit of reorganization might be needed. They don't need a particularly big table. They can spread their books out on the bed while they're working through their homework. But a table, a chair, a notice board that they can pin things on, and a lamp. And the lamp mostly because this table will invariably end up in a corner, which means that your head is between the ceiling light and your books. So you would need, to have some reasonable light. But I think having that space there, maybe chatting to your child in the early part of first year about what homework have they got and structuring it. I mean, to me, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, you'll do whatever homework first and then come down, get a glass of juice, take 5 minutes, and then go back up and do the next lot, and breaking it up like that. Sometimes we just need to walk away from something for a few minutes to give us the extra little bit of whatever we need to keep us going. A full hour and a half up there. I'm not sure that at this stage of my life, I'd even spend an hour and a half doing something like that without a break. So making it more possible. And popping your head in as opposed to supervising and checking. How's it going up here? Are you all right? Rather than lurking outside the door trying to listen to, are they on their phone? Keeping the phones out of the homework. I mean, buy a calculator, buy a clock. They don't need it for anything else. Keep the phone out. If they do need it to look up something, well, let them come downstairs to do it. Use the time to charge the phone. If they want to take a break in the middle of their homework, a 10-minute break, come down, be on their phone for the 10 minutes and then leave it and go back up again. But I know my conversations with first years when we talk about how much homework they have, the ones who have the long homework will admit openly that they lose about 45 minutes having their phones in the room with them. So that's a big part of it. But in some place like their bedrooms, they don't need a study or an office and a swivel chair and all that stuff, but just a space. And then when they're finished, pack it all away, bag ready for the morning, outside the door, Bob's your uncle.
And I guess parents need to manage their expectations of what they're willing to help with and what really gives you the ick in homework. So if you didn't like Irish in secondary school, you're not going to suddenly like it when your own teenager is doing it. So recruit in someone else if you can, or if you have a particularly long commute, be realistic about what you can help with. Be realistic about your adolescent's needs. Is there a dyslexia? Is there a dyscalculia? Is there a learning challenge there? Their concentration may be 20 minutes. And they'll tell you, I need my phone. I need my phone. And you're like, no, you don't. So it's not getting into a battle about it, but it's being ahead. And if they've sport on them, they've activities, it's not ruling all that out. But first year is often negotiation. How are we doing here? Oh, our Mondays are particularly tiring, so maybe we do less, or our Wednesdays. And you're here to observe for a good bit of first year. How are they settling in? And I think Niamh and Helen really emphasize, come into the school, speak to someone, teachers, principals, year heads, chaplains. Not every school has a chaplain, but they are happy to see you. They are happy to answer your questions, because your child might come home and say, oh my goodness, that Niamh hates me. She hates me. She can't stand me. And you're like, maybe that's not particularly true. Ring up Niamh. And every school is happy for that email. And my experience as a parent with a lot of learning challenges, they are interested in your child's well-being. They really are. And they're spot on usually.
Thanks, Gina.
Can I add to that, Emmet, just very quickly? Just from a parental point of view, I mean, how you speak to your child about things is really important. Maybe you didn't like Irish, or you didn't like history, or whatever it is. That doesn't mean they won't. But they certainly won't if you talk about no one in our house was any good at maths, or no one in our house was any good at Irish, or you'll never get a job if you're doing art, this sort of stuff. I mean, if your child was running a race, you wouldn't be standing on the sideline going, you're never going to, no, you're not going to win. There's no way you're going to win. You wouldn't dream of doing that. But yet we do it a lot when it comes to school, talking like that about a language, no one in our house was any good at. I mean, you could have the next Einstein and you've just hit them on the head and knocked it out of them. So be careful with your language. It's really important.
Can I just jump in here now about just about kind of dyslexia, that world of kind of SEN and that kind of additional stuff there. So I have a few questions. I'm going to try and bunch them together, and if we don't cover it all, I might try and come at it from another angle. I've a few here. My child struggles with dyslexia. I've handled in all the reports for her, and I'm wondering what sort of supports will be there for her in secondary school. My child is dyslexic. My daughter's dyslexic, has an Irish exemption. Her secondary school said she has to do a foreign language. They don't offer an alternative, but if she isn't able for the foreign language and drops it, she won't have enough subjects for college. Okay, this is getting into complication here, but should we be trying to do another subject or look for tutors? Okay, so my son has dyslexia, and if he finds a few of his subjects hard, what's the best thing for him to do now, or how can I help him as a parent? What does he need to bring with him for his first day? Now, it's a lot there, so let's just go back to them. Dyslexia, what supports will be there for her in secondary school? She has reports, she has them handed in.
Yeah, first of all, well done for handing in the reports. I think the first thing about having a child with additional needs is to admit it and accept it. I personally have a child with dyslexia, dyscalculia, and all the rest of it. In college now, after getting through second year of a degree course, I never thought I'd see the day. So, so to actually give your child those opportunities, you've said a lot there, Emmet.
Yes, yeah,
but
sorry.
I'm going to try and answer them as best I can. They will get support. Their LS learning support. What I've noticed over the years is there's no stigma attached to it at all, as far as I can see. People are so accepting. Where's such a person? Oh, they're down in LS. It's just normal. It's absolutely fine. Gone are the days of when it was a shameful thing. So many people are diagnosed with things now. I think we were never more aware of people's ways of learning and difficulties with learning as we are in today's day and age. With regard to doing a foreign language, I would be saying that very, very difficult. If you've got dyslexia and you're exempt from Irish and you're finding language a struggle, then I don't think it makes sense to do a foreign language. But saying that, someone expressed, I think, something there that they were worried about subjects, not having enough subjects.
Yeah.
You only need 6 in Leave Insert. Don't panic. You pick 4 subjects for the senior cycle. So you'll have those 4 and English and maths. So you'll still have your 6 subjects. I'd worry sometimes about timetable overload for students. So especially if they have difficulties, sometimes students get a tailored timetable where after first year, the school might say, look, this person is struggling so badly in, for example, history or geography or something like that. So they might have a conversation with the parent and say, is there anything we could kind of maybe cut back on to give that child extra help? But certainly, I spoke earlier about differentiated teaching. If you're finding that your child is struggling in a particular subject, ask that the notes be given. Ask that someone writes down their homework for them in their journal if that's a difficulty. If they don't necessarily have an SNA, if they do have access to an SNA, work with the SNA. Tell them what you need. You know your child best. They're meeting them possibly for the first time. So, arm them with as much help as possible, saying, look, I think my child would benefit from if you can do X, Y, or Z, or I'd like you to let my child do this or attempt this first. That's really important as well for developing autonomy. And just remember they're going from that real childhood stage now into adolescence. They're growing up, they're looking to develop their wings and fly a little bit. So it's just to, I suppose, nurture that as much as possible. I hope I've answered most things there now.
And
Yeah,
it's
no, thanks for
understanding dyslexia, and it's understanding, go back on their report if you have one, because the psychologists will have named their strengths and they will have named what and how they process. All these conditions are about processing. So sometimes they don't do well in class being asked a question because they need time to process. So it's maybe explaining that to the particular teacher, to the year head, and then understand it as a parent from your own perspective, because these are all genetic conditions. So where in the family has it shown up before? What's your learning style? Are you visual? Are you spatial? And often when we have particular presentations, you're looking for the creativity and the abilities, because often there's a sense of, I'm stupid, I'm slow, I can't do it. And that's absolutely not related to any level of intelligence. So it's finding the strengths so that then bad habits don't form in first year. And that's often where avoidance and fear and stress all kick in. And we want to change that trajectory.
Yeah, I think that's very important, Gina, what you're saying there, because I see with young people, I mean, leaving aside something like dyslexia, that we all have different skills. And when I talk to young people about this, we're talking about, well, you have a different way of looking at things than somebody else does. You have a different way of learning things than someone else does, as opposed to you have a deficiency, which is the way it always was back in the day, certainly in the dark ages when I was going to school. It was all about what's wrong with people, and you had the good people and the people with something wrong with them. Whereas now we're saying this person brings all these strengths to the table. They may not be able to do something the way somebody else does, but then who can? I mean, I learn one particular way, you learn another way. And for young people, I think knowing that is so important. That strengths part is really important. I think as well, places like the Dyslexia Association, and there are equivalent ones for other things, are important, where you as a parent can get support from somebody else, and you can hear from people who've been where you are now and who can give you a path that maybe they used, or supports, or equipment, or even language that helped with them. So looking outside even of the school and of yourself, but out into the community of parents of children who have other things going on, can be really helpful as well.
You can't overly praise, you can't overly love your child enough. Often we try to get ahead and go, oh, will they be okay? My goodness, they're a different religion, they're a different race, they're a different gender. What we do, what we do. Stop. Look at your child, your developing adolescent strength. You are wonderful, because then they're more likely to come to you with their worries and their concerns. You're more likely to notice it, and you're more likely to problem solve together. And that is building their strengths. We talk about resilience enough, but do that praise, do that acknowledgement. You did very well today. Now that's not an excuse to stay in bed for longer or do extra screen time. That's not reward. That's just a bit of avoidance that we all do. But build their character. Think of the child who came into your family, what you know about them from day one or whatever day they arrived into your house, and say, I know this about you, because you're building a dream that they don't yet have. And we're all responsible as parents for navigating and being the directors of that dream, because that's what you want for them.
Thanks. Just a quick one here. I suppose I'll call it extracurricular in a way, right? But stuff about a child coming in where they won't know a lot of people. They might be coming from a smaller national school and they're coming in. It's a whole new gang, right? And how are they going to fit in and all the rest? But schools are very welcoming places now. There's lots of stuff to do and lots of stuff to get involved in. And there's another one that's sort of a little bit like that about, they said, my child isn't sporty. Are they going to fit in? And it's quite a sporty school. But there's a lot of schools have the kind of wider extracurricular programs and clubs and lunchtime activities and stuff and they try to get kids involved and mix them up a bit, I think, don't they, Niamh, these days?
Yeah, absolutely. Sport, while it's still extremely popular, it's not the be all and end all anymore. You have things like chess club, coding. Some schools have coding clubs and stuff like that, and choir, ensemble, stuff like that, where people can get involved in other ways, like, and it's not just sport. Like, I had a son who hated sport, absolutely hated sport, didn't understand why someone would kick a ball around a field, and just refuse point blank to play sport. So he set up a chess club, So if there's something that your child is interested in that you think could work well in a school, don't be afraid to say it, because people are willing. Like, there's always going to be teachers supervising lunch breaks, and they will, go to the bother of setting something up if they think that someone will have an interest in it. We're only delighted to see people coming along to choir, or coming along to chess club, or coming along to these things. And like, I had a chess club this year during lunch break, and we had about 40 in it. And it was just super. And they'd wander in and they'd wander out. And the friendships that were made there were just absolutely lovely to see. So, so just encourage that. Lunchtime can be the most lonely time in schools if someone is struggling with friendships. So join the clubs, and just keep them busy. That'd be my advice.
Give them time. Some kids process more gently. They have a reserved style. They have a sensitive style. Think about the weekends, how you can support them. But people don't always make friends in first year. And some of you may be coming from maybe difficult experiences in primary school. And often we have to put things down, and we might talk about a fresh start. But we make friends in the world, but we may not make them at the time we want to. And we hear a lot about bullying, and people ask, well, what is the school policy? You're helping your adolescent to be open with you. You're their main advocate. Yes, we can go to services, we can go to schools, but you are their main champion and advocate, and you're encouraging them to be open and go with their style. If they're reserved, that's okay. Give them time.
It's a busy enough time, I suppose. I would say there's a few kind of questions that are, in a way, they're sort of similar in nature. They're leaning into the same stuff around time. People are time poor now and getting to stuff, and there's homework and there's books. And there's a couple of things here about, the bags being so heavy, and do they need to be bringing everything in and out, and lockers, and how do I manage my locker? There's a lot to the organization and time management of school these days, and thinking ahead and planning. And we have one that she was bringing in everything, bringing home everything, and it was like, it's helping them with that timetable. And you don't need that homework until next week. Why are you dragging those 4 books in and out? That kind of stuff. So there is a bit where, yeah, the bags are heavy in some schools. They can be very heavy, but yeah, they tend to have this thing. I have to have everything, and they're bringing everything in and out every day. So maybe help them a little bit with that. There's a few questions around how much is sporty kids, and there's so much to get to. Is there a limit? Is there this? Is that it's tricky to fit it all in, I think. So is there?
Well,
I don't know. Is there a good answer around the balance of that, Helen? You're
Well, I was just going to say, I was thinking earlier today, while I was thinking about tonight, do you remember we did some webinars during COVID where we were talking to parents, and we would have done things in the youth service, talking to teenagers and to children. The overwhelming message from teenagers during COVID was, apart from the disconnect from their friends, was how much they loved not being on the road every night of the week. How much they loved the bit of breathing space that they got from things. And we all promised faithfully we would never go back to that. And of course, following Monday, we were back into that, But recognizing there's only so much time in a day for a young person. And they do need a little bit of free time to do whatever they call nothing. It could be on social media, it could be reading a book, walking the dog, having a snooze, listening to music. But they do need that. I mean, in the same way that I take my 10 minutes sitting in the car outside the house before I come back in, they need that. They need the time to hang out with their siblings and play with the baby and chat about the day, watch a bit of television, have their dinner in a relaxed fashion. They need all those times. They're really important things for a young person to learn. So balancing, I think, is important. There are people who are anxious to be on teams and anxious to be selected. They're really going to have to look, I think you're going to have to help them look at what are they prepared to give up if they're going to take on more of this, and they can't give up things like homework in school, obviously. Just making sure that they're part of the conversation, I think. but recognizing the need for the young person to develop. This isn't just about a sixth class pupil becoming a first year student. This is about a young person starting into another part of their life, and giving them this bit of space to grow, I think, as well. Um,
Yeah.
Sound like a bit like speech. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. But
It's important, it's balance. And
yeah,
it's what you're showing them. If you're rushing and racing, and you sometimes wonder, oh gosh, my child has anxiety or fear. Look at yourself as a parent. How are you managing that? Because you're their best teachers. They're learning from you. So if we're kind of kicking off and we're not resting and we're not sitting, then they're going to be, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. So watch what you model, and you're going to be their best educator, their best therapist, their best advocate. Parents take on a lot of roles. It's only when maybe you notice the withdrawal, the hiding in the bedroom too much, some of those red flags that you begin to say, right, let's look at this. And it's watching for that too.
Just a couple of quick ones here about assisted technology. A couple of saying that a child has dyslexia, dyscalculia, would turn down for assisted technology. My own child, same knows that. But any thoughts on best platforms to use, websites, things like that? Is there any people aware of any good stuff out there? I think there is good stuff there's lots of stuff available online now, but can you think of anything, Niamh, that people should be following up on?
There's definitely something called Natural Reader, I think it's called, and it just like reads the textbook for you, which has been useful as I've seen. Now, I wouldn't be hugely involved in special educational needs, but just I know from, say, my own daughter and her experience, she had the iPad and she found it useful, and I think nowadays, there's so much out there for people, really, and it's just to tap into all of that and to, just definitely say to the school, look, what would you recommend for a specific area? But yeah, there are lots of things, but definitely Natural Reader is one good one.
Okay, thanks for that. And I'm just thinking, really, a lot of the stuff that a good amount of the stuff we've covered, you could say very usefully communicate with the school. Schools are
Yeah.
very open to they're not going to know if you don't tell them necessarily
Yes.
or communicate. I have a question here about my child has diabetes and they're a bit worried if they're going on it. Communicate with the school, let them
Yeah.
know so the schools are very open to that sort of back and
Hmm.
forth these days, I think.
Yeah.
Gina, this is a very big question to throw in right then because we're coming to the end of the time we've allotted really, but just mentions here about resilience, right? There's a lot of talk about resilience. How do you instill that as something? I don't know. There's a big question for you. How do you instill resilience in a young person?
And it is a big question, and yet it's a very important question because we hear all these buzzwords. Sometimes we need to sit back as parents and we need to look at our own development. How did we develop the capacity to love? How do we manage fear? How do we manage hope? Because that's what's all coupled into resilience. So ask yourself as a parent, what does resilience look like and what does it mean in your house? It's based on values, it's based on experience. What does your expectation of a resilient child or adolescent look like? And if you have a reserved child, if you have a chatterbox, if you have a brave child, if you have a child that needs time, look at how you want to build that in them. What are the important values you want to build? What do you want them to have in 10 years' time when they're out in the world? What is the one thing that you want them to have? Resilience in my house was about eating broccoli, right? Are you going to eat broccoli? Are you going to have something green on your plate because you're going to be healthy? And for someone else, it means something else. It means, maybe saying your prayers at night, maybe that capacity to tell the truth, maybe to stand up for someone. Think of your own value system. That's what you're instilling. And then you want your adolescent to develop their own sense of agency and purpose. We want adolescents to be happy, but we want people most of all to have peace of mind. That's the most important.
Gina, thanks. Our school has a very popular tractor club I'm seeing here. Our school brought
Yes.
an extra set of books for each child to have at home as well as at school. Now, the other one is that you might find your book has a code which you can download like can get the online version of a book and a hard copy can stay in school, that kind of thing.
But they can
How can
also
I
use
contact the
their
teacher?
phones to take a picture of a page of a book. If they only need a couple of pages coming home and it's a big book, take a picture of a couple of those pages and leave the book in the locker.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, there's lots of tips on the stepup.ie website around lockers and bags and things like that as well. A lot of useful stuff on that website for people who might have concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
and
mentioned
sometimes,
before, sorry, Niamh, jump in there.
sorry,
Sorry.
sometimes people use the device at school and leave the textbooks at home because they like to use a textbook sometimes when they're working on their homework and then have the device with the textbooks on them at school.
But every school will be a little bit different because some schools
Yeah,
are kind of quite
yeah,
they'll have the iPads or the laptops, and some
yeah,
won't, and some schools will have a no phone policy, and some
yes,
will
and
they're all
pouches and
managing it a little bit
yeah.
differently.
And just, I
Um,
suppose, to remember now as well that all textbooks and stationery and everything is free now. So they'll be given that when they go
yeah,
in.
yeah. Um,
Copies, biros, everything. Yeah. So
but they still like their trip to Mr. Price to lay it
I
all in.
know. And I think in some ways, it kind of takes from that, because that was always the big day in our house was going down to Wispy's and buying in all the stuff, for
Yeah.
starting back in your year.
Yeah. And is it okay? How can I contact the teacher? Is it by email or phone? That will vary. I'd say you'll get
Yeah.
a lot of this information on your kind of as you're starting your journey. There'll be first year parent night in most schools, and
Mm,
if you haven't had one yet, you'll have it after the summer, and there'll be a lot of back and forth.
mm,
Keep a close eye on the journals. The journals are fantastic. They're full of information, but you
yeah.
need to kind of monitor them really as well to
Hmm.
see, what the commentary is back and forth and what the homework's like, and
Hmm.
you need to really assists the young people, I think, with the first term, particularly this transition into the newness of it all, and just managing their time a bit better and all that. It is a transition. There's no question of that.
Mm.
Any last thoughts? We're a little bit over time.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Trust in the process. Trust in the system, and go for it. And yeah, and I said, some of them said earlier, be positive about the experience. Promote a sense of kind of, oh, this is great. You're going to a new environment now. You're getting to do all these new subjects, and just, I suppose, the positive spin, which is really, really helpful, I think, for young people.
I think as a parent, you're the person who knows your child the best. And if you're expressing doubts, then they really do believe they have something to worry about. So even if you have doubts, deal with them, but deal with them away from your child. As far as your child is concerned, this is going to go perfectly. Be a when parent, when you're settled in, when this. Don't be an if parent, is important.
Yeah, and everyone's
Uh,
journey is different. Don't do the compare and contrast. And even if there is a crisis, most situations are temporary. And as parents, you have a lot of resources and a lot of experience to deal with a lot of challenges.
Listen, just before we wrap up, Gina, I'm just going to share the screen again. This is your website. We've known each other a long time now over the years. We've done bits and pieces on and off, and you've had a practice in Tuam that's grown over the years, I think, a bit as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Look, it's looking for
All
red
right.
flags. Not everybody needs to go to therapy. There's so many resources. But if you find, you're worried, we hear a lot about school avoidance, we hear about self-harm, we hear about a lot. And often therapy is a way of working with the parent and with the adolescent. And while that might be individually or together, any therapist worth their salt wants to resource you as a parent to give your adolescent the skills. So any therapist is meant to be an add-on for a temporary period in your life to help deal with something that, think of yourself as an adolescent. You didn't go home and tell your parent everything, and it hasn't changed. So sometimes we open up the therapeutic space when it becomes challenging, when it becomes a little bit difficult. We're trying to avert crisis, and we're trying to help you, the parent, to resource, to hold, to steady the ship as such. And then adolescents who can come in and who can speak and then leave again better resourced. That's the whole purpose of therapy. And for some it works, and for some it's necessary, and for some you may never need to make contact, and that's wonderful too.
Gina, thank you. There's good supports out there, generally speaking, and I'd say avail of them, as I said before. A couple of things about whether this can be watched back or shared. So yeah, anybody that was registered to attend this evening, you'll get an email when this goes up online, either tomorrow or Wednesday. There was somebody saying that there was a bit of echoing at the start. I hope that didn't stick with it throughout, but apologies about that. I'm not sure why that would have been. So that's it. Thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of the parents appreciated it as well. It just takes a bit of the nervousness and sting out of it, I think, before the summer. So thanks once and for all. If there's anything we didn't cover and you have a burning question, would you send in an email and I'll do my best to see if we can get an answer for you in the next day or two as well. That's it. Good night, all.
Great.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a great
Thanks.
summer.
Bye. Good night.
Bye now.